Hi, welcome back to my channel. I know it's been forever since I last posted, but because of the lockdown, I've been making a lot of DIY stuffs. For today's video, I have this shirt over here that I'm going to turn into this cute top over here. This top took me a very long time because I hand painted the whole print because no matter what shape I was cutting it into, it just kept giving me uniform vibes because I know a lot of schools that have the same bluish uniform. So I cut it up and turned it into a wearable piece. So I hope you enjoyed this video and here we go. The shirt was a plain blue color which I thought was a bit dull, so I painted all these oranges and blossoms and leaves on it, which turned out pretty well. Here are the panels that I cut out with the painted oranges. Next, I marked these dots, 2 at the sides and 2 at the bottom, and I pinned them so that it stays in place when I sew. For the tip of the dart, I'm going to tie knots instead of doing back stitches so that it stays crisp. Also did 2 dots at the back as well. So here are the panels, the bodice part with all the dots in. Next, for the side seams, I've decided to go with a French seam, so I'm going to sew it with the wrong sides faced together. Then I'm going to trim all the excess fabric so that the seam is as small as possible and as close to the stitch. Then I'm going to fold it over so that the right sides are facing together, and now we're on the inner part of the top. And then I'm going to fold it neatly and stitch. With a French seam, you're going to get a much neater seam, so if you don't have a serger, and if you can do this, it's a really good trick to keep all the seams neat. So here's the finished seam. You can also check the link in the description box for a better tutorial on French seams. So here's the finished bodice part with all the seams and darts in. I'm also going to trim the bottom part of the back because it's a little longer than the front. For the sleeves, I have 2 pieces. One is from the sleeve that we cut out and the other is the bottom part of the top that we cut off to crop it. I sewed both the pieces together as shown using a French seam. And this is how it looks. I'm also going to trim the excess. I decided that I wanted a square neck top, so I marked the neckline that I wanted. Next, I'm going to cut the neckline out, both front and back. Since I wanted a cleaner sleeve and I did not have a serger, I decided to zigzag stitch along the curve of the sleeve. I did the same for the armhole of the top as well. Next, I'm going to do 2 rows of straight stitch at the maximum length along the curve of the sleeve. This will help us gather the fabric. To create the gather, I'm going to pull at the ends of the straight stitch that we just did. Now I'm going to attach the sleeve to the bodice piece, like so. I'm first going to pin the pieces in place. For that, I'm going to fold it in half and find the center, and then place it in the center of the bodice armhole and pin it together. After a quick stitch, this is how the top looks now. I'm going to pull all the gathering stitches out later. The fold along the buttons kept folding out, so I'm going to do a straight stitch like so. Next, I'm going to make the neckline a little cleaner. This was a little tricky to do since it was my first time, so I'm going to link the tutorial that I watched in order to do this in the description box below. I marked the length of these strips according to my neckline and then cut 4 pieces, one front, one back and 2 sides. For the front, since it has button plackets, it's going to be a little longer than the back, or you can measure them like so. Next, I'm going to pin all the pieces along the neckline and sew them in place. This is how it looks once it's sewn. To make it clean, I'm going to fold the flaps back and overstitch along the neckline. I pinned it in place before sewing so that it does not move around, and here is how it looks after it's sewn. I decided to use the strips to cover the open ends of the top. I'm going to fold these strips and iron them in place so that it forms a tape like this. I have the back part and 2 side parts. Next, I'm going to tuck the bottom part of the top into the tape and pin it in place. While doing it, you want to make sure that all the seams are facing in the right direction. So for the back seam, I have 2 seams facing in the opposite direction. To make the ends a little cleaner, I'm going to cut the tip of the tape in a triangular shape and fold it back like so. Then I'm going to pin the end over the open end of the side tape. Now I'm going to stitch the tape along the end of the top. This is how it looks after it's stitched. After I cut the top, I had only 2 buttons. I'm going to add a few buttons. I marked equal distances and put in 3 slots. I'm going to use this buttonhole foot to stitch the buttonholes. Next, to finish the sleeves, I'm going to gather the ends of the sleeves and finish them with the tape. Next, I tucked on the ends of this thread in order to gather the sleeves. Then I tried it on in order to adjust the gather so that it fits the way I want it to. I trimmed all the excess fabric as well and then placed the ends of the sleeves and tucked the ends of the sleeves along the tape and stitched it in place. Once it's stitched, I'm going to remove the gathering stitches that I made earlier. And that's all. This is how the top turned out. I quite liked it and it was really comfortable to wear. I also added this little tie at the back because the neckline was so wide. The sleeves tended to fall down a little, so the tie secured it in place. And I'm really happy with how it turned out. I hope you liked the video and I hope you liked the top as well.